Ecuadorian students marched in the capital Quito on Wednesday against the latest neoliberal measures announced by President Lenin Moreno. A blackout has been reported in 4 departments along Colombia's Caribbean coast. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani stressed that his nation is willing to resume talks with the United States as soon as the US government returns to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Ecuadorian students marched in the capital Quito on Wednesday against the latest neoliberal measures announced by President Lenin Moreno. Our correspondent Denise Herrera has the details.
The Ecuadorian students are marching today in Quito against the latest economic measures announced by the government of President Lenin Moreno. They are rejecting the cuts in the education budget, but they are also joining other actions against these neoliberal decisions that are affecting directly all the Ecuadorian citizens as workers. We should remember that during the emergency state, the government of President Lenin Moreno took different decisions to face this crisis. Part of these decisions are economic measures that affect directly all Ecuadorian citizens, but also they are violating the workers' rights.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has noted he is likely to meet with his US counterpart in Washington in early July to kickstart the new North American Free Trade Agreement.
It is very likely that I will go to Washington and meet with President Trump, and it will be soon. We are just waiting to define the character of the meeting. We want the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, to also participate. The meeting will be held on the occasion of the beginning of the NAFTA agreement.
On the 199th anniversary of the Battle of Carabobo, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro called on young people to be involved in every detail of the celebration of the bicentenary of the historic event next year.
We have to be capable of involving our children and young people in this vibrant and dynamic celebration of the bicentenary of the Battle of Carabobo. It is not just another thing. Our Supreme Commander, Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías, established this as an iconic date and referred to the 2021 date as a challenge.
A blackout has been reported in 4 departments along Colombia's Caribbean coast. The Colombian departments of Atlántico, Cesar, Magdalena, Bolívar and part of La Guajira suffered a power blackout this Wednesday, while difficulties with water supplies were also reported. Residents expressed their concern about the possible impact on intensive care units serving COVID-19 patients in these areas, as not all hospitals have an emergency generator. People in the Dominican Republic are expressing concern about a weather phenomenon that has resulted in a cloud of Sahara dust covering the island. The high concentrations of dust from the Sahara have resulted in an opaque and greyish sky, with the haze getting more intense as the day wears on. The dust cloud covering the island has also raised temperatures and blocked sunlight and sparked concern over the impact on people suffering with respiratory conditions.
I never thought that something so far away could reach us, and in such a way, since we live in a tropical country. I have not seen the sun for several days. We are not seeing the clouds, and it's something that really worries us. Let's see what the consequences will be. I hope it won't bring any kind of illness.
I'm afraid that this will make COVID-19's cases more complicated because everything is complicated. And I'm afraid of that because I'm a mother.
According to Minister of Health and Wellness of Barbados, Jeffrey Bostic, the country has not recorded a new case of locally spread COVID-19 in a month. On Tuesday night, the minister moved a resolution to extend the public health emergency until August 31st, arguing that this would allow the Ministry of Health to escalate measures as needed and facilitate the operations of certain areas in response to the pandemic. Barbados has reported a total of 97 coronavirus cases and 7 deaths.
Fellow Barbadians, residents, I greet you.
As of Wednesday, Cuba has reported 2,319 novel coronavirus cases, of which 2,130 people have recovered, while the death toll stands at 85. Our correspondent in Havana, Nayara Tardo, brings us details on how this blockaded Caribbean island has managed to successfully fight the pandemic.
These images were taken on April 1st by a team of specialists of the Tropical Medicine Institute Pedro Curie. Martha became the 9th patient to recover from COVID-19 in Cuba. After nearly 2 months of overcoming the disease and respecting all the security measures, we went to hear the story of the grandmother that beat the virus, that is devastating the world.
¿Cómo se siente Marta a los 95 años después de haber vencido el coronavirus?
Bueno, me siento muy bien, a mí no me ha dejado secuelas.
I feel very well. I do not have any after effects. I feel a bit tired sometimes, but I feel well. I walk with a bit of help. I have a walker to move around the house.
Martha was one of the first COVID-19 cases in the island. Her daughter Clotilde, dancer and choreographer of the renowned dance company Acosta Danza, arrived from Spain the first days of March, yet she could not imagine what would come next. Clotilde was hospitalized together with her mother, but she affirms that seeing the favorable development of her mother made those days in the health institute easier.
Knowing what she slowly but surely overcome, how strong she was, that my mother did not have any serious problems, how well she was cared for. The most important thing for her is knowing 2 things, that Cuba is a special country, unique, and statistics proves it.
Martha could not avoid showing us her passion for football, for Barcelona and Messi. She affirmed that at these stages of her life, beating COVID-19 has been her greatest goal.
Siempre he sido fanática de la mayoría de los deportes.
I have always been a fan of most sports, even wrestling and boxing. But when I started to watch football, luckily I started to watch it with Barcelona's match. That's when I became a fan of football and Messi.
As Cuba shows positive results in the control of the novel coronavirus, this family from Havana appreciates the work of the island's health system, while insisting that the best way to control the spread of the disease is individual and collective discipline.
I believe that the only thing that we can do is take care of ourselves. And thank God we are the best country to do it. We have all the necessary conditions, and my mother is an example of it. There's no way to repay what has been done. I lived firsthand. I lived in the hospital, I lived with the doctors, with the health staff, super committed, super loving and super attentive, and super professional, well prepared. It is amazing.
Today, Marta is part of the more than 2,100 recovered COVID-19 patients in Cuba. As she shows me the beautiful view from her balcony in Havana's neighborhood of Vedado, she confesses that watching the sea every afternoon makes her forget the intense days when she had to fight against COVID-19. Nayara Tardo, Telesur, La Habana.
And we're taking a very short break now, but we'll be right back with more, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Chinese authorities have noted that the coronavirus outbreak that has infected over 250 people in Beijing since early June is now under control.
The Beijing epidemic directly linked to Xinfadi market is basically under control. The prevention and control work has achieved positive results, but at the same time we have discovered household and workplace cluster infections and cases of community transmission.
The number of cases clearly linked to the sheep fatty market is 253, accounting for 98.8% of the total of 256 confirmed cases, and another 3 cases are under further investigation and verification.
A spokesperson for China's Ministry of National Defense noted on Wednesday that shifting blame onto China will not help the United States solve its domestic problems. Spokesman Wu Qian referred to an article published on June 15th in which the US Secretary of Defense Mark Esper stated that the United States and its regional allies will assist China's acts to chip away at the sovereignty of other nations and undermine international rules and norms, in addition to criticizing China's response to the coronavirus pandemic. Wu said the situation in the East China Sea and the South China Sea is generally stable thanks to the joint efforts of countries in the region. He also rejected US meddling in other countries' internal affairs.
For some time, the leader of the US Defense Department has been hyping so-called China threat, in total disregard of the facts, attempting to sow discord among the countries in the region while stigmatizing China's anti-COVID-19 efforts. We express a strong dissatisfaction at and firm opposition to these acts. China and the United States are both important countries in the world. Cooperation serves the interests of the two sides, and conflict can only hurt both. And cooperation is the only correct choice for both sides. The relations between the two militaries are an important part of the ties between China and the United States. It is the responsibility of the military personnel of both sides to maintain the general stability of military-to-military ties, which serves the interests of both countries and meets the shared aspiration of the international community.
In France, Paris's Orly airport, which has been closed since March 31st, will resume commercial passenger flights on June 26. However, only around 25 destinations are to be served via 70 takeoffs and landings, compared with 600 a day before the coronavirus crisis grounded aircraft worldwide. Officials expect around 8,000 passengers to pass through the airport, less than 10% of the daily average of around 90,000. As part of new safety measures, the airport has installed screens at counters and sanitizer dispensers, along with thousands of signs to ensure travellers observe social distancing. Thermal cameras will screen travellers on arrival to help detect any possible coronavirus cases. Belgian Prime Minister Sophie Wilms has warned that the country is not safe from a resurgence of COVID-19 cases and criticised festive gatherings that took place over the weekend in Brussels.
I would like to talk about the big festive gatherings, for example demonstrations such as the held of Flag the Square on Saturday, whose images continue to circulate on social networks. The people who attended took the risk, directly or indirectly, of jeopardizing months of collective efforts. The image convened by these gatherings created comprehension and despair among the population, but sometimes also anger, especially among the citizens who have taken it upon themselves since the beginning of the crisis are scrupulously following the rules. I should remind you that we are still not safe from a rebound of the pandemic. You only have to look at its evolution and in other countries of the world, some even very close to us, to be very convinced of this.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said the world owes the Soviet Union a debt of gratitude for its contribution to the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. The president made the comments at the beginning of the massive military parade in Moscow this Wednesday to mark the 75th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany. Around 27 million Soviet soldiers and citizens were killed in World War II. Russia was forced to postpone the traditional May 9th Victory Day celebrations due to the coronavirus pandemic. This year's parade features some 14,000 troops from 13 countries, as well as military equipment from the time and the latest military hardware showing Russia's fighting capabilities.
Having defended their land, they continue to fight. They freed European states from the invaders, put an end to the terrible tragedy of the Holocaust, saved the German people from Nazism, from its deadly ideology. And it is impossible to even imagine what the world would be if the Red Army hadn't come to defend it. Our duty is to keep this in mind. Remember that the main burden of the fight against Nazism fell on the Soviet people.
And on the occasion of the parade in Moscow this Wednesday to mark Victory Day, we offer a brief context of the historic events leading to the defeat of Nazi Germany.
During the Second World War, from 1935 to 1945, millions of people were killed and all of Europe was in ruins after the Hitler-led German army continued to invade and fight the Allied army. The Soviet Union entered the battlefield to fight the Nazis when they took action against Russian territory. The Red Army had won battles against the forces of the Eastern German Front, making the Nazi forces retreat to the capital. Berlin would be, on several fronts, the center of the attacks. On April 16, 1945, the Soviet troops launched a strategic operation in Berlin. About 464,000 Red Army soldiers participated in that attack, until May 2nd, when the German army surrendered. An approximate of 27 million Russians died during the Second World War. This means that every Russian family lost at least one member. The Battle of Berlin did not only mean the triumph against the Nazis, but also the military defeat of fascism that existed in the region. This triumph is commemorated as Victory Day, where the Russian people go out to the streets to celebrate, with the particularity this year of the measures taken due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Este triunfo es conmemorado como el Día de la Victoria, donde el pueblo ruso sale a las calles a celebrar con la particularidad de este año.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Back to From the South. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani stressed on Wednesday that his nation is willing to resume talks with the United States as soon as the US government returns to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also known as the Iran nuclear deal. President Rouhani also called for the US to apologize to the Iranian people and noted that new talks would be subject to a US commitment to UN regulations and the reparation of damages. The statements came after US officials urged Iran to resume diplomatic talks before the 2020 presidential election in the United States. Iraqi President Barham Salih has called for negotiations to settle disputes between the Kurdistan Regional Government and the Iraqi federal government. President Salih made the statements during a meeting with representatives of the Kurdistan Regional Government at the Presidential Palace in Baghdad. Current discussions focus on the regional government's financial stake of federal budgets, oil exports, disputed territorial areas and the fight against ISIS. President Salih noted that solutions can be reached to guarantee the national interest. The day before the visit, Kurdistan Regional Prime Minister Masroor Barzani said that his government is ready to conclude a comprehensive agreement with Baghdad that guarantees the financial entitlements owed to the region based on the constitution. An Algerian criminal court has sentenced a former Prime Minister and Energy Minister to prison on corruption charges. Former Prime Minister Ahmed Ouyahia was sentenced to 12 years, while former Energy Minister Youssef was sentenced to 3 years in prison. The verdict was the second against Ouyahia, who had already been sentenced to 15 years in another corruption case in December. The court also handed down a 20-year prison term to Ouyahia's former Industry and Mining Minister Abdeslam Bouchiarab, while businessman Rourab Kurim received a 10-year sentence. All the charges were connected to corruption, money laundering and abuse of power. Lebanese health authorities offered an update on COVID-19 figures on Wednesday, reporting 22 new cases. 15 of the new coronavirus cases were locally transmitted and 7 were imported. Health authorities also noted that over 1,700 PCR tests have been carried out in the last 24 hours and over 1,000 patients have recovered from the virus. The total number of confirmed cases in Lebanon stands at over 1,600, while the death toll is 33. Health authorities in Kenya reported new COVID-19 cases on Wednesday, while noting that the novel coronavirus is now present in 40 counties of the country.
The positive cases that we are now reporting, as you all know, are a result of community transmission. And we are aware now that the disease is firmly within our urban and rural settings. And as of yesterday, 40 out of 47 counties had reported cases of COVID-19, which amounts to about 85% of counties in the country. Nairobi is leading with 2,428 cases, followed with Mombasa with 1,304 cases, followed by Busia and Kajiado, which have had many cases in terms of cross-border truck drivers.
Volunteers are taking part in the first COVID-19 vaccine trial on the African continent at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital in Soweto, South Africa. The country has set out to inject 2,000 people with the potential vaccine developed by the Jenner Institute at Oxford University, which is already under evaluation in the United Kingdom.
What is now going to happen is that these 8 participants form part of what is known as Group 1, which is a group where it's a small group of 50 individuals where we're trying to understand 2 important issues. The first issue is the safety of the vaccine, especially in terms of what would be common side effects, and the second issue is how well the body mounts an immune response against the vaccine.
Telesur English is now reaching more areas across the Caribbean. You can find us on the following channel under the following settings. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but we finish with images of the fireworks display that lit up the night sky in Moscow this Wednesday as part of the celebrations to mark Victory Day. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website as well as on social media. For Telesur English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thanks for watching.